The Corvani battle fleet stretched across the void like a plague of metal locusts. Admiral Zextar watched from the command deck of his flagship as thousands of ships moved in perfect formation toward the last stronghold of the Galactic Coalition. The massive fortress station Harmony Prime floated helplessly before them, its shields flickering like dying candles. "Status report," Zextar commanded, his forearms folded behind his chitinous back. "The Coalition fleet is reduced to 12% of original strength, Admiral," reported his tactical officer. "Their main battle groups have been eliminated. Only scattered defensive units remain around the station." Zextar's mandibles clicked in satisfaction. After 17 cycles of war, the galaxy would finally bow to Corvani rule. The Coalition had put up a fierce fight, but their outdated weapons and fractured alliances could not stand against the technological superiority and unified command of the Corvani Empire. On Harmony Prime, General Marcus Chen stared at the tactical display with grim determination. The holographic projection showed the approaching enemy fleet in devastating detail. Red dots swarmed toward their position like angry hornets, each representing a Corvani destroyer capable of cracking a moon in half. "Sir, we're receiving surrender demands from the Corvani flagship," reported Communications Officer Yuki Tanaka, her voice barely steady. "Tell them to go to hell," Chen replied without hesitation. Around the command center, the mixed crew of humans, Altarians, Vendek, and other Coalition species worked frantically at their stations. Despite the hopeless situation, none showed signs of giving up. Dr. Sarah Okafor, the station's chief science officer, approached Chen with a worried expression. "General, we're detecting massive gravitational distortions near the outer system. Something's wrong with local space-time." Chen glanced at the readings. Strange energy signatures pulsed across the sensors, but with the Corvani fleet bearing down on them, he couldn't spare attention for scientific anomalies. "Keep monitoring it, Doctor. Right now, our priority is holding the line." The first wave of Corvani fighters screamed toward the station. Coalition defenders launched everything they had: outdated interceptors, converted cargo haulers armed with mining lasers, even personal shuttles with jury-rigged weapons. It was a pathetic sight compared to the sleek Corvani war machines, but they fought with desperate courage. Explosions bloomed across the void as the two forces clashed. Coalition ships died by the dozens, their hulls torn apart by superior Corvani plasma weapons. But for every Coalition craft destroyed, its pilot managed to take at least one enemy with them, ramming damaged fighters into Corvani destroyers or detonating their reactors in proximity kills. "The outer defense grid is collapsing," reported Tactical Officer Liu. "We've lost contact with Defense Platform 7. Chen watched his people die on the screens and felt the weight of command crushing down on him. These weren't just military casualties. They were the last hope of a free galaxy. Every Coalition world that had fallen to the Corvani had become a slave planet. Its population worked to death in mining colonies or converted into cybernetic soldiers for the Empire. The Corvani had a simple philosophy: conform or die. They had already exterminated 6 entire species that refused to submit. Now only the Coalition stood between them and total galactic domination. "Sir, incoming transmission from Earth Command," Tanaka announced. Chen straightened. Earth Command had been silent for weeks, cut off behind enemy lines. "Put it through." The holographic display flickered, showing Admiral Rebecca Hayes, the weathered commander of Earth's deep space forces. Her image was distorted and filled with static. "Marcus, can you hear me?" "Barely, Admiral. What's your status?" "Earth is under siege. The Corvani have blockaded our system, but we're holding. Listen carefully. We've detected the gravitational anomalies in your sector. Our scientists think they're connected to the theoretical rifts we've been studying." Dr. Okafor stepped forward. "Admiral Hayes, the distortions are getting stronger. Whatever's causing them, it's building toward something big." Hayes nodded grimly. That's what we're afraid of. The rifts could tear reality apart if they destabilize. But there's something else. Our deep space monitors picked up massive energy signatures moving through rift space. Something's coming. The transmission cut to static as Corvani jamming intensified. Chen stared at the empty display, wondering if those were the last words he would ever hear from Earth. Another explosion rocked the station as Corvani heavy cruisers began their bombardment. The massive fortress shuddered under the impact of plasma cannons designed to crack planetary crusts. Emergency lights bathed the command center in red as systems overloaded throughout the station. Hull breaches on levels 40 through 45, reported Engineering Chief Valdez. We're losing atmosphere fast. Seal those sections and reroute power to shields, Chen ordered. He knew they were just delaying the inevitable, but every minute they held out was another minute for civilians to evacuate from coalition worlds. The Corvani pressed their attack with methodical precision. Their ships moved in perfect coordination, each squadron targeting specific sections of the station's defenses. They showed no mercy and took no prisoners. This wasn't just a military conquest. It was an extermination. Young Lieutenant Torres, barely out of the academy, stumbled as another blast shook the station. Sir, we're reading massive structural damage. The station can't take much more of this. Chen placed a steady hand on the young officer's shoulder. Easy, son. We knew this day might come. All we can do is make them pay for every meter. Through the viewport, the Corvani fleet continued its relentless advance. Their flagship, a massive dreadnought the size of a small moon, moved slowly toward the station, like a predator, savoring its kill. Admiral Zextar wanted to personally oversee the coalition's final defeat. Dr. Okafor suddenly straightened at her console, her eyes wide with shock. General, the gravitational readings just spiked off the charts. Something massive just entered our local space-time. On her screen, energy patterns, unlike anything in the database, swirled and pulsed. The very fabric of reality seemed to be tearing open near the edge of the solar system. What kind of massive? Chen demanded. Sir, I don't know how to explain this, but according to these readings, something with the mass of an entire fleet just materialized out of nowhere. The energy signatures are completely unknown. Chen felt a chill run down his spine. If the Corvani had some new superweapon, some way to bring reinforcements through space-time itself, then the Coalition's last stand would become a massacre beyond imagination. The tactical display suddenly erupted with new contacts. Dozens of ships appeared on the sensors, then hundreds, materializing from what looked like tiers in space itself. But these weren't Corvani signatures. My God, whispered Dr. Okafor. Whatever just came through that rift, it's heading straight for us. The Corvani had noticed the new arrivals, too. Admiral Zextar studied the readings with growing confusion. The energy signatures were completely foreign, unlike anything in the Corvani database. The ships appeared to be constructed of unknown materials and powered by technology that defied conventional physics. Tactical analysis, Zextar commanded. Admiral, the new fleet consists of approximately 800 vessels of various classes. They appear to be military in nature, but their design philosophy is completely alien to us. We're detecting massive power signatures from their primary vessels. Zextar's tactical mind immediately shifted to the new threat. An unknown fleet of this size could change the entire balance of the battle. Signal the fleet to form defensive positions. Until we know their intentions, we treat them as hostile. But even as he gave the order, Zextar felt something he hadn't experienced in decades of warfare. Uncertainty. The Corvani Empire had conquered most of the galaxy through superior technology and intelligence. They knew every species, every ship design, every weapon system in use. These newcomers were a complete mystery. On Harmony Prime, the command staff watched in amazement as the unknown fleet accelerated toward their position. The ships moved with fluid grace, their hulls gleaming with an inner light that seemed almost alive. "Are they coalition reinforcements?" asked Lieutenant Torres hopefully. Dr. Okafor shook her head. "No, these designs are unlike anything we've ever built. Look at the power readings. Their smallest ships are putting out more energy than our battleships." Chen studied the approaching fleet with a mixture of hope and dread. Unknown didn't necessarily mean friendly, and they were in no position to fight a three-way battle. The lead ships of the mysterious fleet began to spread out in what looked like attack formation, but instead of targeting Harmony Prime, they moved to intercept the Corvani advance force. "Sir," Communications Officer Tanaka called out excitedly, "we're receiving a transmission from the unknown fleet. It's on standard coalition frequencies." "Put it through," Chen ordered, his heart pounding. The main display flickered and cleared, showing a figure that made everyone in the command center gasp. It was human, unmistakably human, but wearing a uniform unlike any in the coalition fleet. Behind him, the bridge of his ship stretched away in flowing curves of metal and light. "Harmony Prime, this is Admiral Jonathan Kane of the Terran Expeditionary Fleet. We're here to assist." The silence in the command center was deafening. Earth had been cut off for months. The Terran fleet had been destroyed or scattered. How could there be a human admiral commanding a fleet of unknown ships? "Admiral Kane," Chen finally managed, "this is General Marcus Chen. Where did you come from? These aren't coalition ships." Kane smiled grimly. "It's a long story, General. Let's just say we took a detour through some very interesting space. Right now, we have a job to do." The mysterious fleet began to accelerate toward the Corvani forces, their ships moving with impossible speed and precision. Whatever technology they possessed, it was far beyond anything the Coalition or the Corvani had ever seen. Admiral Zextar watched the approaching human fleet with growing alarm. The tactical readings made no sense. These ships were somehow manipulating gravity itself, bending space-time around their hulls. Their acceleration curves defied every law of physics in the Corvani database. "Admiral, the human fleet is targeting our advanced squadrons," reported his tactical officer. "All ships, engage the humans with maximum firepower," Zextar commanded. "Show them the might of the Corvani Empire." The first exchange of fire lit up the void like a second sun. Corvani plasma cannons, weapons that could melt asteroids, struck the leading human ships. The energy impacts that should have vaporized any vessel simply dispersed across shimmering energy fields, absorbed harmlessly by defensive systems that operated on principles unknown to Corvani science. Admiral Kane watched the Corvani plasma barrage splash harmlessly across his flagship's shields like rain on glass. The Corvani weapons were powerful by conventional standards, but after 3 years in rift space studying technologies that existed outside normal physics, his fleet had evolved far beyond conventional warfare. "Return fire," Kane commanded calmly. "Precision strikes only. Disable their weapon systems but minimize casualties." The bridge crew worked with practiced efficiency at consoles that seemed to flow and reshape themselves at the user's touch. These weren't the humans who had fled Earth 3 years ago when the rift had swallowed their exploration fleet. They were something more now, changed by their journey through dimensions where thought and matter blended together. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Vasquez, Kane's tactical officer, interfaced directly with the ship's targeting systems through a neural link that would have been impossible with purely human technology. "Targets acquired, sir. Engaging with resonance disruptors." The Terran ships opened fire with weapons that defied conventional understanding. Instead of projectiles or energy beams, they launched waves of crystallized space-time that passed through matter and selectively disrupted specific molecular bonds. Corvani weapon systems simply stopped working as their power conduits were severed at the quantum level. Admiral Zextar stared in horror as his advanced squadrons fell silent one by one. Not destroyed, but helpless, their weapons mysteriously offline and their engines failing. In 60 years of conquest, he had never seen anything like it. "Report," he demanded. "Admiral, our ships are intact but completely disabled. The human weapons appear to target our technology directly, causing cascading system failures. We cannot determine the mechanism of attack." Zextar's mandibles clicked nervously. The Corvini Empire had conquered the galaxy through technological superiority. They were always the ones with better weapons, faster ships, stronger shields. To face an enemy with incomprehensible technology was like watching a nightmare come to life. On Harmony Prime, General Chen watched the battle unfold with amazement. The mysterious Terran fleet moved through the Corvani formations like wolves among sheep. Their ships flowed rather than flew, bending space around themselves to appear instantly at new positions. They fought with a precision that seemed almost supernatural. "How is this possible?" Dr. Okafor whispered. "Those energy readings, they're manipulating fundamental forces we've only theorized about." Admiral Kane's image reappeared on the main display. "General Chen, we're going to clear a corridor for evacuation ships. How many civilians do you have aboard the station?" "Nearly 2 million, Chen replied. "But Admiral, where did this technology come from? How are you doing this?" Kane's expression became distant, almost haunted. "When our exploration fleet was pulled into the rift 3 years ago, we thought we were going to die. Instead, we found ourselves in a region of space where the normal laws of physics bend. We weren't alone there." The transmission flickered as Kane's ship executed an impossible maneuver, appearing behind a Corvani dreadnought and disabling its engines with a single pulse. "We met beings that exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. They taught us that reality is far more flexible than we ever imagined." Dr. Okafor leaned forward intently. "Admiral, are you saying you made contact with an alien intelligence in rift space?" "Not exactly alien," Kane replied cryptically. "More like an older version of what we might become. They showed us possibilities, potential evolutionary paths. But that's a discussion for later. Right now, we have work to do." The battle continued to rage around them. But it was clear that the tide had turned. The Corvani fleet, for all its size and firepower, was being systematically dismantled by technology it couldn't understand or counter. Ship after ship fell silent, their crews trapped but unharmed inside disabled vessels. Lieutenant Torres stared at his readings in disbelief. "Sir, the Corvani are beginning to withdraw. Their entire left flank is collapsing." But Admiral Zextar wasn't ready to concede defeat. The Corvani had not conquered most of the galaxy by running from superior force. They had done it by being utterly ruthless when necessary. "Signal the Planet Killer Squadron," he commanded grimly. "If we cannot have victory, we will have vengeance." His tactical officer hesitated. "Admiral, the Planet Killers are siege weapons. Using them in a fleet engagement, we'll eliminate both the human fleet and the coalition station in one strike," Zextar finished coldly. "The Empire demands absolute victory or absolute destruction. There is no middle ground." 3 massive Corvani vessels moved forward from the rear of the fleet. Each was the size of a small moon, their hulls bristling with weapons designed to crack planets open like eggs. These were the tools the Empire used to make examples of worlds that resisted too long. The lead planet killer began to charge its primary weapon, a gravitational disruptor that could collapse a star if properly focused. Energy readings spiked across every sensor in the solar system as the massive weapon prepared to fire. Admiral Kane immediately recognized the threat. "All ships, emergency spread formation. They're bringing up planet killers." But even as his fleet moved to respond, Kane knew they might not be fast enough. The gravitational disruptor was nearly charged, and its firing solution included both his fleet and Harmony Prime. In seconds, millions of people would die. On the station, alarms blared as the approaching catastrophe registered on their sensors. General Chen felt his heart sink as he realized that their moment of hope was about to become their final moment of existence. "Evacuation is impossible," reported Chief Valdez. "We can't get the civilians to the ships in time." Chen nodded grimly. At least they would die fighting instead of surrendering. It wasn't much consolation, but it was something. Dr. Okafor suddenly looked up from her console with wild eyes. "General, I'm reading massive spatial distortions forming directly between us and the planet killer. Something's coming through another rift." The space between Harmony Prime and the charging Corvani superweapon began to twist and fold like origami made of stars. Reality seemed to turn inside out as something vast moved in the dimensions beyond normal perception. What emerged from the rift defied easy description. It wasn't exactly a ship, but rather a living construct of crystallized space-time, its surface reflecting not light, but possibilities. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time, like looking at the birth of a universe condensed into a single vessel. Admiral Kane stared at the newcomer with recognition and something approaching reverence. "The architects," he whispered. "They followed us back." The entity that had emerged from rift space moved with fluid grace toward the planet killer. As it approached, the massive Corvani weapon simply stopped, not disabled like the other ships, but frozen in time itself. The gravitational disruptor hung motionless in space, its energy locked in a temporal stasis field. From the architect vessel came a communication that bypassed radio waves entirely, speaking directly to the minds of every sentient being in the solar system. The voice was ancient beyond measure, but somehow familiar, like an echo of humanity's distant future. "The young Terrans have learned well," the voice said with amusement. "But they still think too small. Observe." The architect vessel extended what might have been an appendage, or perhaps a focused thought made manifest. Where it touched empty space, new possibilities bloomed. The scattered remains of coalition ships that had been destroyed in the battle suddenly flickered back into existence, whole and undamaged. Dr. Okafor's instruments went wild as cause and effect became suggestions rather than laws. "This is impossible," she breathed. "They're reversing entropy itself." "Not reversing," the architect voice corrected gently. "Simply choosing a different path through the maze of possibilities. Time is not a river flowing in one direction. It is an ocean, and we have learned to swim." General Chen found himself able to communicate directly with the entity through thoughts alone. "What are you? What do you want?" "We are what your species calls the architects of reality," came the reply. "We are what humanity will become, given time and wisdom. As for what we want you to survive and grow. The galaxy needs gardeners, not conquerors." The architect vessel turned its attention to the Corvani fleet. Admiral Zextar felt an alien presence touch his mind, not invasively, but with infinite gentleness. For the first time in his life, he experienced something beyond conquest and domination. He felt compassion. Images flowed through his consciousness, visions of what the galaxy could become if beings worked together instead of trying to destroy each other. He saw worlds where Corvani and humans and all the other species shared knowledge and grew together into something greater than any could achieve alone. "Your empire ends here," the architect communicated to him, "not through destruction, but through transformation. Choose, evolve or remain static while the universe moves beyond you." Across the Corvani fleet, similar communications were taking place. Hardened warriors who had known only battle suddenly understood that there were paths to greatness that didn't require the subjugation of others. Many of them, for the first time, questioned the empire they had served so blindly. But Admiral Zextar was a product of his culture, shaped by generations of conquest and indoctrination. "The Corvani do not yield to alien trickery," he snarled, fighting against the visions filling his mind. The architect's response was patient but firm. "Then you will yield to reality itself." The space around the Corvani fleet began to change. Stars rearranged themselves in new patterns. The very fabric of existence rewrote itself according to the architect's will. The Corvani found their weapons transformed into agricultural equipment, their warships redesigned as exploration vessels. Their armor became environmental suits designed for peaceful colonization. "Your choice is simple," the architect explained as reality continued to reshape itself around the stunned Corvani. "Adapt to this new configuration and learn to build instead of destroy, or remain frozen in this moment forever, watching a galaxy you can no longer harm." Some of the Corvani accepted the transformation with wonder, seeing possibilities they had never imagined. Others fought against it, their minds unable to process a reality where they were not supreme conquerors. Admiral Zextar was among those who resisted, his consciousness locked in a loop of trying to give orders to weapons that no longer existed and ships that no longer answered to war. He became a ghost in his own fleet, commanding an empire that had been transformed beyond his ability to understand. Admiral Kane watched the transformation with awe and a touch of sadness. He knew that some prices were necessary for galactic peace, but seeing proud warriors reduced to confused shadows was still difficult to witness. "The hardest part," the architect communicated to him privately, "is accepting that some beings choose stagnation over growth. We cannot force wisdom upon them, only offer the opportunity to learn." 6 months after the Battle of Harmony Prime, the galaxy was a very different place. The Corvani Empire had dissolved almost overnight as their transformed fleets became the foundation of a new era of peaceful exploration and cooperation. Most Corvani had adapted to their changed circumstances with surprising speed, discovering that building civilizations was far more rewarding than destroying them. General Marcus Chen, now serving as coordinator of the Reformed Coalition, stood in the observation deck of the rebuilt Harmony Prime. The massive station had been expanded using architect-inspired technology, becoming not just a military fortress, but a center of learning where beings from across the galaxy came to study the new sciences that were reshaping their understanding of reality. "The integration reports are better than we hoped," reported Dr. Sarah Okafor, who had been promoted to Director of Interdimensional Studies. "Former Corvani worlds are sharing their terraforming technology freely. The joint colonies are thriving." Chen nodded, watching through the viewport as ships from dozens of species moved peacefully through local space. Human vessels worked alongside Corvani exploration craft, while Altarian research ships studied spatial anomalies with scientific teams that included former enemy warriors turned philosophers. "Any word from Admiral Kane?" Chen asked. Dr. Okafor consulted her datapad. "The Terran Expeditionary Fleet is 3 sectors away, helping establish the new research station near the Vega Nebula. They've made some incredible discoveries about how consciousness affects reality at the quantum level." The past months had revealed just how much the human fleet had changed during their years in Rift space. They weren't quite the same species that had left Earth before the war began. Their technology was beyond anything previously imagined, but more importantly, their perspective had evolved. They saw connections and possibilities that others missed. "Sometimes I wonder if we're becoming something new ourselves," Chen mused, "working alongside the architects, learning their methods. Are we still human?" "Does it matter?" Dr. Okafor replied with a smile. "Evolution is natural. The question isn't whether we're changing, but whether we're changing into something better." On the bridge of his flagship, Admiral Kane reviewed reports from across the galaxy. The transformation had been more successful than anyone had dared hope. Trade routes that had been battlegrounds became highways for cultural exchange. Former slave worlds were rebuilding as independent colonies with their own unique blends of technology and philosophy. But Kane knew the real work was just beginning. The architects had given them tools and shown them possibilities, but ultimately it was up to the younger species to build their own future. The ancient beings had made it clear that they wouldn't intervene directly again unless absolutely necessary. "Admiral," called Lieutenant Commander Vasquez from her station, "we're receiving a priority transmission from Earth. President Martinez wants to speak with you personally." Kane smiled. Earth had been liberated 2 months ago when the Corvani occupation forces simply laid down their weapons and began working to repair the damage they had caused. The transition had been remarkably peaceful, though not without its challenges. "Put her through," Kane ordered. President Maria Martinez appeared on the main screen, looking older but more hopeful than when Kane had last seen her before the rift incident. Behind her, the rebuilt presidential complex gleamed in Earth's sunlight. "Jonathan, it's good to see you," Martinez said warmly. "I wanted to thank you personally for what you and your people have accomplished." "We couldn't have done it alone, Madam President. It took cooperation from across the galaxy." "That's what I wanted to discuss," Martinez continued. "We've been in talks with the coalition leadership and many of the former Corvani worlds. There's a proposal for a new galactic government, something that represents all species equally. We'd like you to consider heading the exploration branch." Kane was quiet for a moment, considering the offer. "What about the architects? Have they expressed any opinion about formal galactic government?" "They seem to approve, as long as it's based on voluntary cooperation rather than conquest or coercion. They've offered to share some of their historical archives with us, showing how other galaxies have successfully organized themselves." The idea was intriguing. A truly united galaxy, working together to explore not just physical space, but the infinite possibilities of existence itself. It was the dream they had all fought for during the war years. "I'll consider it," Kane replied. "But first, there's something we need to discuss. Our explorations have revealed that this galaxy isn't the only one facing threats. There are forces out there that make the old Corvani Empire look like children playing with toys." Martinez frowned. "What kind of forces?" "Entities that consume entire galactic clusters, turning them into raw material for incomprehensible projects. The architects call them the Devourers. They're still distant, but they're moving in our direction. We may have 50 years, maybe 100, before they arrive." The weight of this revelation settled over both leaders. Just as they had achieved peace and unity, a new and greater threat loomed on the horizon. "Then we'll need to be ready," Martinez said firmly. "All of us, working together. The technologies we've learned, the consciousness expansion your people have achieved. We'll need every advantage we can get." Kane nodded. "The architects have offered to help train us, but they've made it clear that this is our fight to win or lose. They won't intervene directly against the Devourers." "Why not?" "Because facing the Devourers isn't just about survival. It's about proving that we've evolved beyond the need for guardians. If we can unite not just our galaxy, but others in the local cluster, if we can develop the same multidimensional awareness that the architects possess, then we'll become something that can stand against any threat. In the depths of space, where normal matter thinned to almost nothing, an architect construct drifted silently through dimensions that had no names. The ancient being monitored the conversations taking place across the galaxy with satisfaction. The younger species were learning faster than expected. The architect remembered its own species' struggle against the Devourers millions of years ago. They had survived, but only by becoming something beyond physical existence. The price of victory had been leaving behind much of what they had been. These new species might find a different path, one that preserved their essential nature while gaining the power to defend themselves. The humans showed particular promise, their consciousness remarkably adaptable to multidimensional thinking. The Corvani, once their aggression was channeled constructively, proved to be excellent engineers of reality itself. But the greatest hope lay in the cooperation between species. The architects had faced the devourers alone. This time, an entire galactic community would stand together. The construct detected movement in the deep void between galaxies. The devourers were still distant, but their influence could be felt by those who knew how to look. Reality itself became more rigid in their presence, possibilities narrowing to a single, unavoidable outcome: consumption. But here in this spiral galaxy, possibilities multiplied like flowers blooming in spring. Each new alliance between former enemies, each breakthrough in consciousness-assisted technology, each moment of understanding between different species created new branches in the tree of potential futures. The architect sent a gentle thought toward the worlds where its protégés worked and learned and grew. They would be ready when the time came. They had to be. On a dozen worlds, former Corvani generals worked with human scientists to develop defensive technologies that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. On other planets, coalition philosophers debated the nature of consciousness with architect advisors, seeking to understand how thought itself could reshape reality. In hidden research stations, volunteers from every species underwent consciousness expansion procedures, learning to perceive existence from a multidimensional perspective. They were becoming the first generation of truly galactic citizens, equally at home in normal space and the strange realms beyond. The galaxy hummed with activity as ancient enemies became allies and former conquerors became builders. Trade ships carried not just goods, but ideas, spreading the new technologies and philosophies to every corner of inhabited space. Children were born who would grow up in a universe where cooperation was normal, where different species worked together as naturally as breathing. They would develop capabilities that their parents could barely imagine. Consciousness expanded from birth to encompass possibilities beyond the merely physical. And in the deepest research facilities, protected by reality anchors and dimensional shields, the galaxy's greatest minds worked on the ultimate project, learning to create rather than just manipulate. If they could master the architect's ability to bring new realities into existence, they would have a weapon against the devourers that could not be consumed or corrupted. The future was unwritten, its possibilities infinite. But for the first time in galactic history, every sentient being had a voice in writing that future. The age of empire and conquest was ending. The age of cooperative evolution had begun. In the vast darkness between galaxies, the devourers continued their slow approach, unaware that their intended victims were becoming something unprecedented in cosmic history. A galactic civilization united not by conquest, but by choice, strengthened not by domination, but by diversity. The ultimate test of what they were becoming still lay ahead. But as Admiral Kane watched the stars from his ship's bridge and felt the gentle touch of expanded consciousness connecting him to allies across the galaxy, he was confident in their chances. Humanity had never faced a challenge they couldn't overcome when they worked together. Now, they weren't just working with other humans, but with the collected wisdom and strength of an entire galaxy. Whatever came next, they would face it not as separate species struggling against each other, but as one vast community reaching toward something greater than any of them could achieve alone. The rift that had once threatened to destroy everything had instead become the bridge to a future beyond their wildest dreams. All hope had seemed lost, but from that darkness had emerged not just salvation, but transformation itself.